And the most important thing I have to tell you is this. You know those really nice drapes your aunt bought for you that you just put up in the living room? Yeah, well, they're on fire. And so's the rest of your house. Don't do that. Always start with the most important thing. Not only do you not know how long you'll have someone's attention, but the thing you start with frames everything else. If you start with something that's not important or irrelevant, it becomes much harder to get your point across. You are asking for more brain power from your reader or listener, and your job is to make it easier. Communication is hard enough already. So what about presentations, like this one? Now, the most important thing I can tell you about presentations is that I believe they should be no longer than 15 minutes plus Q&A time, which means, unless I'm some kind of hypocrite, I kind of have to tell you everything you need to know about writing and persuasive communications in 15 minutes. So here we go. The world is filled with other people. And if you want to get anything done at scale, you've got two choices. You can try and force people, which is expensive and always backfires, or you can persuade them. And the way you persuade people is you give them a message. You tell them something. This can be in any form, but all persuasive messages are crafted. And the best way to craft them is to write them. Almost every message that's made a real impact on you or me was first written down. Just like everything that's ever been made was once a sketch. Every piece of communication in the history of the world works like this. There is an audience, even if you're talking to yourself. There is something that you want that audience to do, and there is a message. There's no action. There's no point to the message. And the quality of the message is how well it gets the audience to take action. This is as true of passing exchanges in a hallway as it is of emails, as it is of advertisements, sitcoms, novels, movies, great works of art. And if you're stuck on any piece of communication, the answer is always to refine or redefine one of these three. Maybe my desired action is not to get someone to buy, but to get them to sign up for a free trial, knowing that they will buy later when they see how good it is. And of course, the problem, capital P, with communication is that we live in an attention deficit disorder of an age. We are literally the most messaged humans in history. Because nobody has enough attention, when you do manage to get some of it, you have to deliver your goods as quickly as possible. So one way to think about the clarity of your message is it's inversely proportional to the number of words you use. The longer you take, the more likely you are to lose your audience. An email is only as good as its subject line. A thriller is only as good as its first chapter. A TV show is only as good as its pilot episode. Because if that doesn't work, nobody's going any farther. And that's terrifying, but there it is. For getting things done, you have to have a point and make it. Or, as a Hungarian proverb that a copywriter named Luke Sullivan made up says, tell the truth and run. The goal of your writing and messaging is to pack as much meaning into as little of your audience's attention as possible. Use each word like you were paying for it. And I don't mean out of someone else's budget. I mean out of your own pocket. Because your audience is paying with their time and attention. This is exactly backwards from what we are taught in school. Remember the 10-page essay where if you didn't write 10 pages, you'd have points deducted? That's exactly backwards. You should get a higher score the fewer pages you can use and get the entire message across. Nobody really cares about grammar until you waste their time. Then they start looking for reasons to justify why they hate your writing. In fact, grammar isn't even a good way to teach writing. It's just easy to grade. It is a great tool for studying and comparing languages, but not, I'm afraid, for teaching the practical skill of writing. Every message uses one or more of three fundamental appeals. Logos, ethos, and pathos, or if your ancient Greek is a little rusty, logic, credibility, and emotion. So if I tell you that a giant meteor is going to strike the earth and kill all of us, I don't quite pull it off, right? It is an emotional appeal to fear, but if I say, hey, notice how it got really dark all of a sudden, and you look out the window and it's just gotten dark, I've used logic to become more persuasive. And then if I say, I work for NASA, now you're really worried. The more of these appeals you can get working at the same time in your message, the better off you are. One of the reasons why the world is so crazy right now is that we have a problem with credibility, ethos, authority, whatever you want to call it. Is there one person or one worldview that everybody trusts? One person who could say, wait a minute, come on, this is crazy. So there are 6 fundamental forms of writing: story, analogy, argument, instructions, dialogue, and summary. And you can use any one of these forms inside another one. I can tell you a story as a dialogue between two people. A fable is a story inside an analogy. The best parts of Shakespeare are characters making arguments by having a dialogue with themselves. To be or not to be, and on and on. Don't bend your brain. It's turtles all the way down. Of these, story is the most powerful way to communicate, because we, as social animals, have to determine the intent of action. You're walking towards me. Are you coming to me to give me a hug or to punch me? Why did the lightning flash? Zeus was angry. The story structure rabbit hole is very deep. Here's a useful shorthand I stole from Pixar. Once upon a time, there was a blank. Every day, blank. Till one day, blank. Because of that, blank. Because of that, blank. And until finally, blank. An analogy or metaphor is how the language grows to encompass things there are no words for. For example, email or firewall are both, at their heart, analogies. So if you want to make a new thing comprehensible, you explain it in terms of a thing your audience understands already. But analogies also allow you to make your point with a great deal of power and subtlety. Writing about music is like dancing about architecture. Argument is very important for getting things done. I don't mean bickering. This is making a case. What is important? Why should we do this? And how is it best done? Proceeding logically from there. Instructions can be very hard to write, but are increasingly important in our complicated world. And if I could tell you one thing about instructions, it's to explain the end state right away. The goal is to build a shed that's square, level, and watertight. Here's how we get there. But see how that's really just starting with the most important thing? Dialogue. Two people talking, or one person talking to themselves, is a very powerful way to communicate. It activates the part of our brain, even when you're reading, that understands the spoken word. And that part is much more capable with language than our eyes. And a summary. I want to condense information so you can get the gist very quickly. What's a James Bond story about? Well, we can read a few Wikipedia pages like this. Or we could explain that it's Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which is the tagline for a Japanese James Bond poster. I don't think it's going to get much tighter than that. So the process of writing. Ernest Hemingway said it loud and said it proud when he said the first draft of anything is shit. So the real difference between a great writer and an ordinary writer is their skill at rewriting. Mark Twain said if you catch an adjective, kill it. Stephen King said revising down to the bare essentials is always a little like murdering children, but it must be done. In fact, shameless plug alert, one of the things I'm working on is a subscription-based rewriting service. You send some words in, and then you get them back edited and proofed the next business day. Now, there's no guarantee that you're going to like what you wrote. You put garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. But you'll get it back, and in the words at least, it will be as efficient as possible. So then you can refine your thinking. There is no great writing, only great rewriting. You already know how to write. So a large part of getting better is getting better at rewriting. This is the limiting skill. This is the skill that all writers, regardless of what they write, need to get better at. Here are my 3 best tips. Number 1, make the last paragraph the first paragraph. For some reason, especially an early draft, when you write your document, you explain, and then in the summary at the end is the biggest, most important thing. 8 times out of 10, if you take that last paragraph and move it all the way up to the top, you will immediately see what you are really trying to say, and it will become obvious how to rewrite the rest of the piece. Number 2, read it out loud. The written word, general literacy, writing, goes back maybe 100 years, maybe 200 years. Civilization is 3,000 years old. So the earliest writing is 3,000 years old, but our general experience of it is only a couple hundred years. The spoken word, the spoken language, is at least 150,000 years old. So we as a species have evolved and have more experience with speech, orders of magnitude more experience with the spoken word than we do the written word. Your ear is smarter than your eye will ever be. Number 3, have a friend coach you. Here's how to be a writing coach. Have the person you're trying to help read it to you. Ask them, what are you really trying to say? And when they're done answering, their answer will be better than what they wrote because they're giving it another pass in their brain. And when they're done answering, you pause. And you have to pause because it's the pause that sells it. And then you say, well, why don't you just say or write that? It works every time. Writing is the entire process by which we discover what we're trying to say. If you have an idea, you write it, and you realize either the words or the idea wasn't quite right. So you do it again. And the harder the subject, the more iterations you need. And when you work this process, you get to clarity. Clarity gets you to power. The power to drive careers, build companies, and I think to change the world. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to comment or reach out. I will answer all of them.